Let me bring in now Martin Indyk. He's a former U.S. ambassador to Israel, distinguished fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, and frankly, perhaps the best person from U.S. perspective to understand this relationship between the United States and Israel. Ambassador Indyk, it's always good to see you.
Chuck, pleasure to be with you.
Let me start with the bigger picture here and why I wanted to make this our lead story, because I think there's a ton of parallels between sort of where we are in our democracy and where Israel is in theirs. And the question that I pose to you, that I've been posing to others, is this our past or our future?
Well, it's both. There is a reflection, as you said, an echo of what we've seen in the United States, although I have to say that we have not seen here the vast number of people going out in the streets to save our democracy. It's been the MAGA supporters that have been out there in the streets. I was in the demonstrations in Israel last week, and it was really quite stunning. The broad and deep support there is amongst secular Israelis. And notice, like the MAGA Republicans, they've taken the flag as their symbol, which I think a brilliant patriotic way of doing things. So in some senses it's an echo, but it's also a preview of the kind of divisions that both our democratic societies face now, as the far right tries to push an anti-democratic agenda. In our case, it's challenging elections and the results of elections,
right,
and suppressing votes and so on. In Israel's case, it's the judiciary and protecting the independence of the judiciary.
One of the things that I found mildly surprising so far is that Prime Minister Netanyahu, in the past, has used our political divide to help himself at times, right? He has not done that yet, and maybe he won't in this case. Does that surprise you?
You give him too much credit, I'm afraid. I think he's been trying, and I think he's been failing. In fact, I'm quite surprised. Maybe Governor DeSantis has said something, but we don't hear it from the Republican leaders. In fact, Romney, Lindsey Graham, and even Marco Rubio came out expressing concerns about the judicial reform. And, you know, Joe Biden has put himself out on the line now, coming out publicly in saying that Netanyahu is not welcome in Washington until he cleans this up. You would expect a hail of criticism from the Republicans, and I can't believe that Bibi and Ron Dermer haven't been on the phone calling them up. We'll probably see an editorial in the Wall Street Journal tomorrow, but other than that, it's been surprisingly quiet.
Is that because you think the nature that there is a personal element to it, right? The fact that if he didn't directly benefit from this judicial review for his own corruption case, there might be more political support for him here for it?
Look, I can't pretend to know the minds of Republican politicians, but I do think that it affects the way people generally look at this judicial reform. The fact that Netanyahu could benefit from it personally and avoid going to jail as a result of stacking the court, which is the one piece of legislation that he was pushing so hard for.
Yeah.
And so there is that question mark that I think undermines his argument about how he's just trying to do the right thing for democracy.
I'm just curious, do you think, I know Netanyahu is probably somebody that would never claim to have any regrets, but do you think he regrets dabbling so much in our politics in 2011 and 2012? Because I do think that left a mark on the Democratic Party. It left a mark on Biden. It left a mark on Washington that is not going away.
No, I'm not aware of any sense of regret on his part about that. I think the sense of regret he probably does have is the way in which he let this issue get away from him. As your correspondent was saying, he's a master politician, and he's a master of the narrative. And he lost control of his coalition, and he lost control of the narrative. He's trying to grab it back now, but I think it's too late. And I think that's his regret. his focus, he wanted his focus to be on Iran and Saudi Arabia. He can't achieve his objectives there without the help of Joe Biden. And now he's got a big problem with Joe Biden, and he can't even get to Washington to talk to him or his Republican friends about it. So I think that he has plenty of reason to regret that he let this issue dominate his agenda.
What's your sense of whether he can keep his coalition together if he walks away from this judicial reform?
I don't think he can afford to call their bluff and walk away from it. I think he's captive of them, and I'm quite pessimistic about the chances for consensus being achieved in these circumstances. The opposition.
So that means this government's more likely going to collapse. Isn't that do you think it more likely they collapse, or they're able to ram something through?
Well, I think they'll try to ram something through. There'll be massive protests, and then things will start to come apart. It always takes longer than you think, but I don't see how his balancing act can continue at this point. He's going to have to choose, and if I know Netanyahu, he'll choose political survival, try to keep his right-wing coalition together, and religious coalition. They've all got big stakes in this judicial reform. They're not about to give up. And the opposition isn't about to give up. And now President Biden's weighed in with the opposition. So he's got a problem with the United States on top of that. So he's really caught in a very difficult situation.
So he's buying some time. We have the Passover holiday. He's going to make another attempt, you assume, by the end of the month, end of April?
Well, I think if I know Netanyahu, although he's not acting the way he used to, he will try to put something on the table that looks reasonable and get the other side to reject it so he can blame them when it falls apart. But I don't think that he has the room to reach a compromise agreement. Martin
Indyk, former U.S. ambassador to Israel, and like I said, in many ways, probably America's foremost expert on U.S.-Israeli relations. Good to see you. Thanks for your perspective.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.